Do you ever think about those Christmas movies from the 1980s? The ones so ridiculous, so heartfelt, so wonderfully strange that it feels unreal they vanished from holiday rotation? These films filled living rooms with laughter, confusion, and pure seasonal chaos. So how did something so unforgettable become so completely forgotten? Santa Claus. The movie from 1985 was supposed to be the definitive holiday blockbuster, the kind of sweeping epic that would make every other Christmas film look like a school play staged by enthusiastic but underfunded children who forgot their lines. The producers poured millions into lavish sets, elaborate costumes, and special effects that promised to bring the North Pole to life in ways audiences had never imagined possible. The opening scenes sparkled with genuine wonder, showing Santa's origins with the kind of magic that made children lean forward in their seats and parents smile at the memory of their own youthful beliefs. But then Dudley Moore showed up as an elf gone rogue. John Lithgow chewed scenery as a villainous toy manufacturer, and the whole production careened wildly off course into territory nobody expected or frankly wanted. Critics savaged it mercilessly. Audiences avoided it in droves, and yet somehow it kept appearing on television every December, usually at odd hours when nothing else was on. Kids who stumbled across it found themselves hypnotized by its bizarre charm despite everything. Ernest Saves Christmas from 1988 was the kind of movie that had no business being as watchable as it turned out to be. And that surprise became half the reason people kept tuning in year after year whenever it appeared on television during the holiday season. Jim Varney had already built a career on his rubbery-faced Ernest P. Worrell character, bouncing through commercials and direct-to-video adventures with an energy that exhausted everyone in the room who tried to keep up with him. But putting Ernest in charge of saving Christmas felt like a gamble nobody expected to pay off so well. The plot was simple enough. Santa needs a successor, Ernest gets involved, chaos follows like a loyal puppy chasing its owner through a snowstorm. What made it work was Varney's commitment to every pratfall, every exaggerated expression, and every moment of wide-eyed sincerity buried beneath the slapstick. Kids loved it because Ernest talked directly to them through the screen, breaking the fourth wall constantly like it owed him money. Cable networks played it endlessly, and the film never tried to be more than what it was. Elves from 1989 remains one of the strangest holiday films ever committed to celluloid, and that is saying something for a decade absolutely filled with bizarre creative choices that defied all explanation and common sense from start to finish. The premise alone sounds like someone lost a bet and decided to film the consequences. Nazi experiments, killer elves, a department store setting, and Dan Haggerty wandering through scenes looking like he had accidentally walked onto the wrong set and decided to stay anyway because the catering was decent. Nothing about the movie made logical sense, and yet it played constantly on late-night cable during the holiday season when programming directors needed cheap content to fill dead air. Kids who should have been asleep stumbled across it and spent the next week having nightmares about tiny creatures with sharp teeth and murderous intentions lurking behind every corner. Parents who caught glimpses assumed they were hallucinating from too much eggnog. The tone lurched wildly between horror and fever dream, never settling anywhere comfortable. It became a cult classic because it was unforgettable. Babes in Toyland from 1986 brought together a cast that, on paper, should have been pure magic. Drew Barrymore, fresh off her fame, Keanu Reeves before anyone knew what he would become, and a premise built on classic holiday fantasy that had delighted generations of children and their families for decades. What audiences got instead was a made-for-television disaster that looked like someone raided a theater's prop closet and hoped for the best while praying nobody noticed the wobbling sets or the visible tape-holding costumes together in the background. The songs felt awkward and forced, and the whole production carried the unmistakable scent of a rushed deadline and a budget that ran out somewhere around the second act. Barrymore tried her best to bring energy to a script that gave her almost nothing to work with. Keanu wandered through scenes with that vaguely confused expression he would later perfect in entirely different contexts. Networks aired it anyway because holiday programming needed content to fill the schedule, and families watched because the remote was just too far away to change it. A Smoky Mountain Christmas from 1986 was Dolly Parton's attempt to bring holiday magic to the mountains of Tennessee, and the result was a film nobody quite knew how to categorize or explain to friends who asked what they had just watched together on television that evening. She played a country singer escaping to a cabin in the woods, only to encounter a group of orphans living in hiding and a mysterious witch who may or may not have been the real villain of the story depending on how you interpreted the confusing script. The songs were earnest and catchy, the scenery was genuinely beautiful, and the plot made approximately 0 sense by any reasonable standard of storytelling or basic narrative logic that anyone could follow. Kids loved Dolly because she sparkled, literally and figuratively, in every single scene she occupied. Parents loved Dolly because she was Dolly, and that was enough to justify anything happening on screen. The movie aired during prime holiday special season and fit right in despite its glorious oddness. Nobody questioned why a witch was involved in a Christmas movie at all. Heck, Christmas Comes to Willow Creek from 1987 featured John Schneider hauling holiday spirit across frozen Alaskan highways in a truck that seemed held together by duct tape, prayers, and pure seasonal determination to reach its destination against all odds, no matter what nature threw at them. The premise was simple. 2 brothers, 1 truck, a cargo of presents, and a blizzard that wanted to ruin everything they had worked so hard to deliver to a remote community waiting for Christmas joy. It was the kind of made-for-television adventure that networks churned out every December, hoping something would stick with audiences looking for seasonal entertainment between wrapping presents and baking cookies. Schneider brought his Duke boys charm, grinning through danger with the kind of confidence that made viewers believe everything would work out fine no matter how bad the situation looked on screen. The stakes were never really that high, but the movie pretended they were, and that pretense was half the fun. Families watched it during holiday marathons while half paying attention to something else happening in the room. Prancer from 1989 told the story of a young girl who believed she had found one of Santa's reindeer injured in the woods near her struggling family's farm, and her conviction drove the entire movie forward even when nothing else seemed to work quite right. The premise promised heartwarming holiday magic, and it delivered that warmth, though not always in the ways audiences expected when they sat down with their popcorn hoping for simple seasonal cheer. The girl's faith was fierce and unwavering. Her father's skepticism was exhausting to witness scene after scene, and the reindeer itself spent most of the movie looking vaguely annoyed at being the center of so much human drama. Critics praised its sincerity while admitting the pacing dragged like a sleigh through heavy mud. Families watched it hoping for uplifting holiday warmth and got something closer to a meditation on grief, poverty, and the fragile nature of childhood belief. Kids cried at scenes that were supposed to be hopeful. Parents cried at scenes that were supposed to be triumphant. The movie confused everyone into remembering it. One Magic Christmas from 1985 was Disney's attempt to prove that holiday movies could be magical and deeply traumatizing at the same time. And boy, did they succeed in ways nobody anticipated when they sat down expecting typical Disney warmth and comfort for their family viewing. The premise followed a mother who had lost her Christmas spirit, and the universe responded by subjecting her to a bank robbery, the apparent drowning of her children, and visits from an angel who looked more like a figure from a nightmare than a messenger of hope and redemption. Kids who expected cheerful Disney fare sat in stunned silence as the story grew darker by the minute, with no relief in sight. Parents glanced nervously at each other, wondering if they had made a terrible mistake pressing play on the VCR. The movie eventually delivered its redemptive ending, but the journey there felt like an endurance test designed by someone who really wanted audiences to earn their happy feelings through genuine suffering first. Critics called it ambitious. Families called it utterly confusing. It lurked in schedules every December. And The Night They Saved Christmas from 1984 assembled an unlikely cast to defend Santa's workshop from the greatest threat of the decade. Oil company executives with drilling permits and quarterly earnings reports to satisfy at any cost. Jaclyn Smith brought glamour to the frozen North, Art Carney brought warmth as a delightfully grandfatherly Santa Claus, and the villains brought PowerPoint presentations about resource extraction rights that somehow felt menacing despite being completely mundane and corporate. The conflict was absurd, the stakes were oddly specific, and the resolution felt like something a committee had approved without fully reading the script or questioning its logic. Kids loved the idea of Santa needing rescue from corporate greed, even if they did not fully understand what oil drilling meant or why adults were so concerned about it. Parents appreciated the environmental message, vague as it was, tucked beneath the holiday tinsel and snow. Networks aired it during prime family viewing hours, confident that familiar faces would keep audiences watching until the credits finally rolled. Santa Claus from 1959 was a Mexican production that defied every expectation of what a holiday film should be, and by the 1980s, it had found a permanent home on American UHF channels desperate for affordable content to fill their late-night schedules when nothing else was available. The plot involved Santa battling the devil with assistance from Merlin the Wizard, a combination that made sense to absolutely no one outside the fevered dreams of its creators who clearly had different ideas about Christmas storytelling. The visuals were garish, the dubbing was atrocious, and the whole production radiated an energy that sat somewhere between charming and deeply unsettling in ways that haunted viewers for days afterward. American kids encountering it for the first time had no idea what they were watching, only that they could not look away no matter how strange things got. Parents walking through the room stopped, stared, and slowly backed out again without asking any questions. The movie became legendary, not because it was good, but because forgetting it proved impossible no matter how hard you tried. A Christmas Carol from 1984 starred George C. Scott as Ebenezer Scrooge, and his performance was so intense that children watching from behind the couch wondered if this was supposed to be a horror movie instead of a holiday classic. Scott growled, snarled, and glared his way through Victorian London with the kind of ferocity usually reserved for war films and courtroom dramas where someone was about to get destroyed on the witness stand. Every line felt like a threat, every scene crackled with barely contained fury, and the ghosts visiting him seemed genuinely nervous about their assignment. Parents who remembered gentler versions of the story sat in mild shock as Scott transformed Scrooge into something closer to a wounded predator than a redeemable miser. Kids hid behind pillows during the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come scenes, and some refused to watch it again for years. The production values were excellent, the supporting cast was solid, and the faithfulness to Dickens was admirable. But none of that mattered as much as Scott's volcanic presence dominating every frame. It became a holiday staple precisely because it was unforgettable. Scrooged from 1988 took the classic Dickens tale and filtered it through Bill Murray's particular brand of sardonic detachment, creating a holiday film that confused as many people as it entertained during its theatrical run. Murray played a heartless television executive getting visited by ghosts on Christmas Eve, and his reactions ranged from genuine terror to bemused indifference depending on the scene and possibly his mood that day on set. The supporting cast included Carol Kane as a violent fairy who beat Murray senseless while giggling, and that energy pretty much defined the entire movie's approach to holiday cheer. Critics did not know what to make of it. Audiences laughed in some scenes and sat in baffled silence during others, and the ending featured Murray delivering a rambling monologue directly to the camera that either moved you to tears or made you wonder if the script had simply run out of pages. Cable television embraced it anyway, airing it constantly every December until it became impossible to avoid. The movie aged into cult status, beloved by those who appreciated its dark edges. Gremlins from 1984 was technically a horror comedy, but its Christmas setting was so integral to the plot that millions of families accidentally made it part of their holiday viewing tradition and then spent years questioning that decision. The movie started sweetly enough, with a father bringing home an adorable creature called a mogwai as a Christmas gift for his son, complete with rules that absolutely nobody was going to follow for more than 10 minutes. Once the gremlins multiplied and started terrorizing the town, the holiday backdrop became darkly hilarious, with creatures caroling, decorating, and generally treating Christmas like their personal playground of chaos. One infamous scene had a character describing how her father died in a chimney dressed as Santa, and parents across America wondered who exactly approved that monologue for a family film. Kids loved the mayhem, adults appreciated the sharp humor hidden beneath the creature effects, and everyone agreed the movie had no business being as entertaining as it was. It became a December staple through sheer force of personality and a willingness to be genuinely weird. Trading Places from 1983 wrapped its sharp social commentary in a holiday bow, setting its climactic scenes during a freezing Christmas season that made the contrast between wealth and poverty impossible to ignore. Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd played men whose lives got swapped as part of a cruel bet between two wealthy brothers, and watching them navigate each other's worlds provided comedy that still holds up decades later. The movie never pretended to be a traditional Christmas film, but its holiday setting gave the story emotional weight that a summer release could not have matched. Murphy's transformation from street hustler to sophisticated trader showcased his incredible range, while Aykroyd's descent into desperation added genuine pathos to the comedy. The supporting cast included Jamie Lee Curtis and Denholm Elliott, both delivering performances far better than a December comedy required. Critics praised it, audiences packed theaters, and cable networks discovered it played beautifully every holiday season when people wanted something funnier than the usual sentimental fare. The movie proved that Christmas films could be smart and satirical. A Very Brady Christmas from 1988 reunited the Brady family for a holiday special so earnestly cheesy that it somehow circled back around to being genuinely entertaining against all reasonable expectations. The original cast returned, older and slightly confused about why they were doing this, but committed enough to sell every heartfelt moment the script demanded. The plot involved various family crises converging on Christmas, including a collapsed building that trapped Mike Brady underground while his family sang carols above, which was exactly as ridiculous as it sounds. Kids who had grown up watching the original series in reruns felt a strange nostalgia seeing these characters again, even if the situations made no logical sense whatsoever. Parents who remembered the 70s show appreciated seeing familiar faces, even if those faces looked noticeably more tired than they had during the original run. The movie aired to massive ratings, proving that nostalgia was a powerful force that could override common sense and critical thinking. It became a time capsule of 80s television, preserving the Brady family in amber. He-Man and She-Ra. A Christmas special from 1985 attempted the impossible task of bringing Christmas to the planet Eternia, and the results were exactly as bonkers as that premise deserved. The plot involved two Earth children accidentally transported to a world of magic and muscle, where they proceeded to explain Christmas to characters who had never heard of it and had no logical reason to care. He-Man and She-Ra teamed up to protect these kids from Skeletor, who for some reason wanted to destroy Christmas despite having no previous beef with the holiday whatsoever. The animation was standard Saturday morning fare. The voice acting was enthusiastic, if not particularly subtle, and the message about holiday spirit felt grafted onto a universe that absolutely did not need it. Kids watched it because He-Man was on screen, and they would watch He-Man do literally anything, including learn about the true meaning of Christmas from children half his size. Parents endured it because the kids were quiet, and the special was only an hour long. It became a curiosity, remembered fondly by those who caught it at the right age. The Christmas Toy from 1986 was Jim Henson's attempt to explore what toys did when nobody was watching, and the result traumatized an entire generation of children who were not prepared for what happened next. The premise seemed innocent enough. Toys came alive in a playroom and had adventures while the family slept, very much in the spirit of what Pixar would later perfect, with considerably more therapy-inducing care. But Henson's version included a rule that changed everything. If a toy was caught out of position when a human entered the room, it would freeze forever, essentially dying in front of the other toys and the audience. Children watched beloved characters get frozen and mourned by their friends, and suddenly, Christmas morning felt a lot more complicated than it had before. The puppetry was beautiful, the songs were catchy, and the emotional devastation was real and lasting. Parents who remembered Gentle Muppet specials sat in stunned silence as their children processed mortality through felt and plastic. The movie became legendary precisely because it refused to play safe with its young audience. Troop Beverly Hills from 1989 was not technically a Christmas movie, but its brief holiday subplot delivered unexpected laughs that lodged in memories of anyone who caught it during cable rotation. Shelley Long played a wealthy socialite leading a troop of privileged girls through wilderness challenges they were hilariously unprepared to face, and somewhere in there, a holiday camping sequence emerged that perfectly captured the film's absurd charm. The girls decorated their designer tents with battery-powered lights, served gourmet hot chocolate, and treated roughing it like a spa weekend that happened to involve slightly more nature than usual. Parents watching recognized the satire beneath the silliness, while kids just enjoyed seeing wealthy characters fail upward through every challenge. The movie never became a blockbuster, but it found its audience through endless cable airings and video rentals that turned it into a sleeper favorite. Long's performance anchored the whole production, delivering comedic timing that elevated material which could have fallen flat in lesser hands. It proved that Christmas-adjacent content could be just as memorable as dedicated fare. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation from 1989 became the definitive holiday comedy for anyone who had ever watched their own family gatherings descend into beautiful chaos, and Chevy Chase's performance as Clark Griswold anchored every ridiculous moment with desperate sincerity. The plot followed the Griswold family's attempt to host a perfect Christmas, which naturally meant everything that could go wrong did go wrong in spectacular fashion. There was the cat getting electrocuted by Christmas lights, the tree catching fire, the elderly relatives causing mayhem, and a squirrel terrorizing the living room during dinner. Each disaster built on the last until the finale delivered a rant so cathartic that audiences quoted it for decades afterward. Kids loved the slapstick, parents recognized their own holiday stress reflected back at them, and everyone agreed the movie captured something true about the gap between Christmas expectations and Christmas reality. Cable networks played it so often during December that certain scenes became more familiar than actual holiday memories. It remains the gold standard for family dysfunction comedy, unrepeatable and endlessly rewatchable. Die Hard from 1988 was never intended to be a Christmas movie, and yet its December setting, holiday party backdrop, and snow-dusted finale made it impossible to discuss without acknowledging its accidental place in seasonal tradition. Bruce Willis played a New York cop visiting Los Angeles to reconcile with his estranged wife, only to find himself barefoot and alone against a building full of terrorists led by the magnificent Alan Rickman. The movie was pure action, pure tension, and pure 80s excess, with explosions, wisecracks, and a body count that seemed excessive for any season, let alone one associated with peace and goodwill. But something about watching one ordinary man fight impossible odds on Christmas Eve resonated with audiences who were tired of sentimental holiday fare. The debate about whether it qualified as a Christmas movie became an annual tradition itself, with passionate arguments on both sides that never reached resolution. Willis became a star, Rickman became legendary, and the movie became a December staple for anyone who wanted their holiday viewing to include machine guns and broken glass alongside the usual warmth. Lethal Weapon from 1987 opened with Christmas music playing over a scene of a woman leaping to her death, which set the tone for how this movie planned to handle the holiday season. Mel Gibson played a suicidal cop partnered with Danny Glover's family man detective, and their chemistry carried the film through explosions, shootouts, and moments of genuine darkness that had no business appearing in anything remotely seasonal. The Christmas setting was incidental to the plot, showing up in decorations, background music, and one memorable scene involving a tree lot that ended in typical action movie fashion. Yet, something about watching two mismatched partners bond while chaos erupted around them during the holidays felt strangely appropriate. The movie never tried to be heartwarming, but the partnership at its center delivered emotional payoffs that left audiences satisfied anyway. Cable networks eventually figured out they could air it in December without anyone complaining, and slowly it joined the unofficial canon of holiday action films. Glover's catchphrase about being too old for this became a seasonal mood in itself. The Muppet Family Christmas from 1987 brought together characters from The Muppet Show, Sesame Street, and Fraggle Rock in a farmhouse gathering that should have been logistically impossible but somehow worked through sheer puppetry willpower. Kermit, Miss Piggy, Big Bird, and dozens of other beloved characters crowded into one snowy location, trading jokes, singing songs, and creating the kind of crossover event that modern franchises spend billions trying to replicate. The special had a warmth that felt completely genuine, likely because Jim Henson himself was still deeply involved in the production and cared about every felt-covered moment. Kids watching got to see their favorite characters interact for the first time, while parents appreciated the clever humor woven throughout the chaos. The farmhouse setting created cozy intimacy despite the massive cast, and the songs ranged from silly to genuinely touching. Licensing issues later made the special difficult to air in its complete form, which only increased its legendary status among fans who remembered watching it during its original broadcast and wanted desperately to share it with their own children. Ziggy's Gift from 1982 was an animated special that somehow won an Emmy, despite being one of the most melancholy pieces of holiday programming ever created. The special followed Ziggy, that sad, bald little cartoon character from newspaper comic strips, as he tried to spread Christmas cheer while dressed as a sidewalk Santa. Everything went wrong, naturally, because Ziggy's entire existence was built on gentle disappointment and quiet perseverance. Kids watching felt confused emotions they could not name, while parents recognized something painfully real in this little figure trying so hard to make others happy despite his own loneliness. The animation was simple, the story was straightforward, and the emotional impact was surprisingly devastating for something featuring a character best known for appearing on greeting cards. It aired sporadically throughout the 80s, usually catching viewers off guard with its tender sadness between more cheerful holiday programming. The special proved that Christmas entertainment did not always need to be bright and loud to leave a lasting impression on audiences who encountered it at just the right vulnerable moment. Pinocchio's Christmas from 1980 brought Rankin Bass's signature stop-motion animation to the classic wooden boy story, adding holiday elements that felt both charming and deeply strange depending on your tolerance for bizarre musical numbers and uncanny puppet faces. The special followed Pinocchio trying to earn money to buy Geppetto a Christmas present, which led to adventures involving toy kidnappers, a villainous puppeteer, and songs that lodged in your brain whether you wanted them there or not. The animation had that distinctive Rankin/Bass texture, all rounded edges and slightly unsettling character designs that somehow felt cozier than more polished productions. Kids watched it during holiday marathons alongside more famous specials, never quite sure how to rank it against the established classics. Parents remembered it vaguely, unable to hum any specific songs, but certain they had heard them before somewhere. The special existed in that middle space of holiday entertainment, not beloved enough to be essential, but not forgotten enough to disappear entirely from seasonal programming that needed content to fill time. Nestor, the long-eared Christmas donkey from 1977, technically predated the 80s, but its constant airings throughout the decade traumatized enough children to earn its place in any discussion of forgotten holiday specials. The special told the story of a donkey born with absurdly long ears, who was mocked, rejected, and eventually carried Mary to Bethlehem through a deadly snowstorm that killed his mother along the way. Kids who expected cute animal adventures instead got a meditation on suffering, sacrifice, and the cruel indifference of both nature and society toward anyone who looked different. The animation was standard Rankin/Bass fare, the songs were earnest to the point of overwhelming, and the emotional devastation was absolutely real for anyone under the age of 10 watching on a cozy December evening. Parents had no idea what they had put on the television until the crying started and would not stop. The special became legendary for exactly this reason, passed down through generations as a warning about what holiday programming could do when it decided to stop being gentle. Before Strawberry Shortcake became the polished pastel icon of the 1980s, she appeared in a simpler, rougher, and far more experimental first winter special. The original Strawberry Shortcake winter special had a grainy look that made every scene feel like a frosted cookie left too long in the cold. Strawberry herself had a slightly oversized bonnet, cheeks a shade too rosy, and a voice that sounded like it had been recorded inside a real mixing bowl. Her friends drifted through scenes with the kind of stiff movements that made it clear animators were doing their best with limited resources, but none of that mattered to kids. The world of Strawberry Land looked magical, covered in sparkling snow that shimmered like sugar sprinkled across construction paper. The plot usually involved saving a friend, fixing a winter mishap, or bringing warmth back to a chilly corner of their world. Shortly after airing, however, character licensing moved to a new corporate home, and the early version became tied up in pre-American greetings agreements. That paperwork turned the special into a ghost. It has never been reissued, remastered, or officially acknowledged. Fans who remember it describe it with wide-eyed nostalgia, certain it existed even if modern archives pretend otherwise. Head of the Class took the classic high school sitcom and turned it upside down. Instead of focusing on detention-bound delinquents, it followed a group of overachieving geniuses in an honors program, kids who could quote Shakespeare but struggled with everyday life. Their teacher, Charlie Moore, played by Howard Hesseman, wasn't the strict academic type. He was a free spirit who used humor and life lessons instead of test prep to get through to his students. The result was a show that mixed intellectual jokes with the kind of heart only an 80s sitcom could deliver. Each episode balanced clever dialogue with relatable teenage emotions, crushes, insecurities, and the pressure to succeed. The kids were nerdy, eccentric, and lovable, creating a dynamic that felt fresh and honest. It celebrated intelligence without ever being smug, showing that being smart didn't mean having it all figured out. Head of the Class became a quiet inspiration for students watching at home, proving that learning could be funny and teachers could be heroes in denim jackets. It made being different cool long before that became mainstream. The Brady Kids Christmas cartoon captured that unmistakable 70s blend of sunshine, polyester, and cheerful chaos. Except this time, wrapped in holiday ribbons and snowflakes, the Brady Kids, already known for their groovy animated spin-off, found themselves thrown into a Christmas adventure filled with bright colors, winking stars, and guest appearances from talking animals that had no logical connection to the Brady universe. The animation had that charming stiffness of the era, where characters struck dramatic poses and held them just long enough for you to notice Marcia tried to organize the perfect holiday celebration. Greg attempted to play cool while juggling way too many tasks, and Bobby and Cindy got themselves into the kind of trouble only Saturday morning cartoons could justify. The whole special flowed with catchy background tracks that sounded like someone ran holiday jingles through a psychedelic filter. Kids adored it because it felt familiar and festive all at once, but licensing for the Brady Bunch franchise became tangled in a web of ownership changes, syndication deals, and shifting copyrights. The Christmas cartoon, being part of the animated spin-off rather than the main show, ended up slipping through the cracks. Today, it survives mostly in the memories of those who caught it at the right moment, glowing softly in that perfect mix of nostalgia and, wait, did that really exist? Kate and Allie was one of the first sitcoms to show that family could look a little different and still be just as funny, warm, and real. Susan St. James and Jane Curtin starred as two divorced mothers who decided to move in together and raise their kids under one roof. What followed was a witty, relatable look at modern life, filled with both hilarious clashes and heartfelt moments. The two women had completely different personalities. Kate was carefree and impulsive, while Allie was practical and cautious. Their friendship became the show's foundation, proving that love and support didn't always have to come from romance. The humor came from everyday struggles, dating disasters, parenting headaches, and career challenges, but it never lost its optimism. The show handled its progressive themes with subtlety, never preaching, but always empowering. Kate and Allie resonated with viewers because it reflected the reality of so many families in the 1980s, imperfect, adaptive, and endlessly resilient. It was a sitcom that made you laugh, nod in recognition, and believe that friendship really could get you through anything. Santa and the Space Explorers was a bold attempt to mix two things children adored in the 1970s: holiday cheer and outer space adventures. Santa teamed up with a group of young astronauts who traveled through glittery galaxies on a mission to deliver gifts to planets waiting for a visit from the North Pole. The animation sparkled with star fields, cosmic swirls, and future-themed sleigh upgrades, that looked like they were taped together with Christmas hope. Kids loved how Santa floated in zero gravity with his beard drifting like a slow comet. But when television networks later phased out space-themed holiday content, the special vanished from schedules. No reruns, no re-releases, just the faint memory of Santa riding through space with explorers who believed Christmas could reach the stars. Too Close for Comfort took the idea of an overprotective dad to hilarious new extremes. Ted Knight starred as Henry Rush, a cartoonist who couldn't quite separate his family life from his art, or his adult daughters' personal lives. When his daughters decided to rent out the apartment below his San Francisco home, Henry's world turned upside down. Every episode became a tug-of-war between his parental instincts and their growing independence. Knight's delivery, equal parts bluster and vulnerability, made Henry both infuriating and lovable. The daughters' quick comebacks kept him on his toes, creating comedy that was both fast-paced and affectionate. The show perfectly captured the clash between old-school values and the changing attitudes of the 1980s. It was about learning to let go, one punchline at a time. Too Close for Comfort thrived on its relatable family squabbles and Ted Knight's comic genius. By the end of every episode, no matter how stubborn Henry had been, love always won, and that mix of humor and heart made it a staple of the decade's family sitcoms. The Wacky Races Christmas Rally took the show's chaotic energy and wrapped it tightly in tinsel, snowdrifts, and competitive holiday spirit. All the racers returned, each determined to win the North Pole Cup while navigating snowy roads, slippery ice patches, and the occasional mischievous elf causing mayhem. At one point, the racers skidded so wildly that even the animators seemed surprised by where the vehicles landed. The whole race felt like someone handed holiday decorations to a pack of toddlers and said, "Make it festive," then animated the results. There was a frantic charm to every scene, the kind that made you lean forward without realizing it. Dick dastardly plotted elaborate holiday-themed traps, and Muttley giggled with delight every time a snowman exploded in just the wrong place. Kids watched with wide eyes as the cars skidded, spun, and rocketed across landscapes painted in bright winter colors. It was festive, silly, and perfectly tuned to the Saturday morning vibe, but the special featured characters owned by several different rights holders, and once the contracts expired, the whole holiday rally fell into legal limbo. Attempts to re-air it were blocked by overlapping claims, leaving fans with only fleeting memories and a few blurry promotional images. If Silver Spoons had been a toy catalog come to life, it wouldn't have looked much different. The show followed Ricky Stratton, a young boy who moved in with his wealthy, fun-loving father, Edward, after his parents' divorce. Their home looked like every kid's dream, a mansion filled with arcade machines, go-karts, and even a working train running through the living room. But beyond the fantasy, Silver Spoons was about learning what money can't buy: responsibility, kindness, and connection. Ricky brought structure to his father's carefree lifestyle, while Edward taught his son to loosen up and enjoy life. The chemistry between Joel Higgins and a young Ricky Schroeder made the father-son bond both funny and heartfelt. The show also reflected the 1980s obsession with wealth and luxury, but always with a wink. It reminded viewers that even in a mansion full of gadgets, the real treasures were laughter and love. Silver Spoons gave audiences a weekly escape into wish fulfillment, while gently grounding it with lessons that still resonate today. The Magic Toy Shop Christmas Mystery felt like watching someone animate the inside of an old-fashioned toy store that only opened once every December. The special began with a gentle snowfall, a creaky sign swinging outside, and a narrator whose voice sounded like they had read thousands of bedtime stories. Inside the toy shop, wooden soldiers marched in uneven rhythm, dolls blinked slowly with painted-on eyelashes, and Jack-in-the-Boxes popped up with a timing that seemed suspiciously unpredictable. The mystery at the heart of the special was charmingly simple. Something inside the shop kept moving out of place overnight, and the toys needed to solve the puzzle before Christmas morning. Kids loved the sense of adventure, even if the animation occasionally froze for a second while the background caught up. The colors were warm, the music twinkled like old music box chimes, and the whole thing felt like it was sewn together with imagination instead of technology. Unfortunately, being a syndicated special meant it changed hands often. Copies were poorly stored, some recordings were taped over, and the master reels were never properly archived. As a result, the entire special vanished from circulation. Only a handful of people remember the exact plot, but everyone who watched it remembers the feeling: cozy, mysterious, and wonderfully handmade. Long before the polished, jingling world of Rankin Bass completely took over holiday animation, there was a curious little off-brand Frosty special that flickered onto screens for a very short window of time. Frosty's Magical Christmas Adventure had the kind of charm that comes from trying your absolute best with whatever budget you have. And trust me, this one did not have much to brag about. Frosty himself looked slightly different from scene to scene, sometimes a bit rounder, sometimes a bit taller, and occasionally with a face that seemed surprised by its own existence. But that unpredictability was part of the fun. Kids did not care if the snowflakes looked more like falling cotton balls or if Frosty's hat tilted at an angle that defied physics. They cared that he talked, he laughed, and he led the children through a holiday adventure filled with snowy hills, twinkling lights, and the kind of magic only the 1970s could get away with. The music leaned heavily on bells, flutes, and whatever instruments the studio had lying around. The backgrounds looked like watercolor paintings that had been left out during a snowstorm. But it worked. It felt cozy, homemade, and sincere. Sadly, when the official Frosty franchise tightened its hold on the character, this little offbeat special disappeared instantly, swallowed up by licensing rights that left no room for unofficial magic. To this day, people swear they remember it, even if nobody can find a surviving tape. In the 1980s, sitcoms loved breaking the mold, and Who's the Boss? Did it beautifully. Tony Danza played Tony McKelly, a retired baseball player who took a job as a live-in housekeeper for Angela Bauer, a successful advertising executive and single mother. The setup flipped traditional gender roles, creating endless opportunities for both humor and heart. Tony's warmth and street-smart charm clashed perfectly with Angela's structured, work-obsessed personality. Their chemistry was undeniable, sparking years of will they or won't they tension that kept audiences hooked. At its core, the show was about family, the unconventional kind that proves love and respect can build stronger bonds than blood alone. Tony's daughter Samantha and Angela's son Jonathan added layers of tenderness, grounding the comedy in real emotion. The show tackled ideas about independence, equality, and changing family roles without ever losing its laughs. Who's the Boss? Felt like the 1980s itself, confident, evolving, and full of optimism for what modern families could look like. It wasn't just funny, it was quietly revolutionary, disguised as a feel-good sitcom. Before Strawberry Shortcake became the polished pastel icon of the 1980s, she appeared in a simpler, rougher, and far more experimental first winter special. The original Strawberry Shortcake winter special had a grainy look that made every scene feel like a frosted cookie left too long in the cold. Strawberry herself had a slightly oversized bonnet, cheeks a shade too rosy, and a voice that sounded like it had been recorded inside a real mixing bowl. Her friends drifted through scenes with the kind of stiff movements that made it clear animators were doing their best with limited resources, but none of that mattered to kids. The world of Strawberry Land looked magical, covered in sparkling snow that shimmered like sugar sprinkled across construction paper. The plot usually involved saving a friend, fixing a winter mishap, or bringing warmth back to a chilly corner of their world. Shortly after airing, however, character licensing moved to a new corporate home, and the early version became tied up in pre-American greetings agreements. That paperwork turned the special into a ghost. It has never been reissued, remastered, or officially acknowledged. Fans who remember it describe it with wide-eyed nostalgia, certain it existed even if modern archives pretend otherwise. There was something irresistibly charming about the Raggedy Ann and Andy Christmas Hour, the kind of animated special that looked like it had been stitched together with yarn, fabric, and a dash of pure holiday innocence. Watching it felt like you were peeking into a toy chest brought to life, with characters that moved in that soft, almost wobbly way cartoons had before animation studios discovered sharper outlines and flashier techniques. Raggedy Ann, with her careful stitching and big button eyes, always seemed to know exactly how to bring warmth to even the coldest Christmas storyline. And Andy, ever the loyal companion, tagged along with that signature mix of optimism and clumsy enthusiasm. The special aired only a handful of times, always around dinner hour, when families gathered with plates on their laps and the living room lights dimmed just enough to make the tree sparkle. The story changed slightly each year in people's memories, because the animation had that dreamlike quality that made everything feel softer and brighter than it probably was. And then, almost without warning, the special vanished. Ownership rights shifted, characters changed hands, and the entire hour of animation slipped into a legal maze so complicated that even Santa's elves could not untangle it. All that remains now are hazy memories, a few grainy still frames in old magazines, and the lingering feeling that Christmas once felt a little more hand-stitched. The Facts of Life began as a simple spin-off of Different Strokes, but it grew into something much more. Set in a girls' boarding school, it followed a group of teens learning about friendship, mistakes, and growing up under the guidance of their patient house mother, Mrs. Garrett. What made the show special was how it blended humor with honesty. Sure, it had plenty of silly moments, food fights, crushes, and awkward dances, but it also tackled topics most sitcoms avoided. The girls dealt with peer pressure, body image, and the challenge of finding their place in the world. Yet through it all, The Facts of Life remained lighthearted and hopeful. Each episode felt like a gentle lesson wrapped in laughter, the kind of comfort television that families could watch together without worry. By the time it ended in 1988, viewers had grown up alongside Blair, Joe, Natalie, and Tootie. It proved that a show didn't need wild gimmicks to be funny, just heart, humor, and a reminder that you really do take the good, you take the bad. There was something wonderfully surreal about stumbling across the animated Nutcracker on Saturday morning, especially when most kids tuned in expecting superheroes, slapstick animals, and cereal mascots shouting about sugar. Instead, you got ballerinas gliding across hand-painted backdrops, soldiers marching with dramatic orchestral thumps, and dream sequences that floated along in soft pastel colors. It was not fancy animation by any means, but it had an earnest charm that pulled you in whether you understood the story or not. The characters would twirl and leap with movements that seemed slightly too ambitious for the animators, resulting in poses that held for half a second longer than intended. But instead of feeling awkward, it somehow added to the dreamlike quality of the whole production. The music, recorded in a slightly echoing studio, carried the familiar melodies that adults recognized instantly and children absorbed without even knowing the name, Tchaikovsky. The special aired only a few seasons before networks shifted toward higher energy programming, and bigger budget Nutcracker adaptations stole the spotlight. With no reruns, no home release, and no surviving press materials outside a few grainy photos, this delicate little version faded into the shadows. Ask anyone who remembers it, and they will tell you the same thing. It was strange, lovely, unexpected, and absolutely unforgettable. The Little Rascals Christmas cartoons were the kind of specials that made kids feel like they were part of a mischievous holiday club. The animation was rough around the edges, as if someone had sketched the characters on notebook paper and breathed life into them at the last second. The gang's Christmas stories usually involved grand plans that spiraled out of control almost immediately. Spanky wanting to fix a crooked tree, Alfalfa trying to serenade carolers without missing a note, Darla attempting to organize a holiday pageant that went sideways the moment Buckwheat showed up with his enthusiastic improvisations. And of course, Pete the Pup wandered through scenes in that calm, unbothered way only a dog can manage. Families would tune in expecting harmless chaos, and always got exactly that. But the humor reflected the era, mixing slapstick antics with character portrayals that modern audiences would not find so charming anymore. Licensing for the Little Rascals was already a web of complications, with ownership of specific characters jumping from studio to studio over the decades. Add in outdated depictions and jokes that have not aged particularly well, and the cartoons quietly slipped into the vault. They were never remastered, never reissued, and barely mentioned in rerun blocks afterward. Still, for many who watched them on snowy December mornings, these scrappy, heartfelt, chaotic cartoons hold a sentimental place impossible to forget. If you wanted a sitcom that could make you laugh and still surprise you, Night Court was it. Set in a Manhattan courtroom that never slept, the show revolved around the unflappable Judge Harry Stone, a magic-loving, jazz-listening oddball who somehow kept order among the chaos. Every night brought in a parade of bizarre defendants, protesters, pranksters, and plenty of repeat offenders, and an even more eccentric crew of lawyers and clerks. The humor was sharp, rapid-fire, and often surreal, but the show's secret weapon was its warmth. Amid the slapstick and one-liners, Night Court showed compassion for the strange, the lost, and the misunderstood. The mix of courtroom antics and human stories made it stand out from the typical workplace sitcom. The cast chemistry, especially between Harry Anderson, John Larroquette, and Marky Post, kept the show alive for nearly a decade. It was unpredictable, heartfelt, and often ahead of its time in addressing real social issues under layers of absurd comedy. When the gavel finally dropped in 1992, Night Court had already earned its spot as one of the most uniquely funny and oddly touching shows of the 1980s. Yogi Bear's Lost Christmas Caper was one of those blink-and-you-miss-it specials that aired in only a few regions and at odd hours, usually sandwiched between local commercials and late-afternoon reruns. It featured Yogi at his most optimistic, wandering through a snow-covered Jellystone Park with Boo Boo at his side, both of them determined to help Santa with a sudden holiday emergency. The animation had that classic Hanna-Barbera bounce, where characters slid across the screen instead of walking, and mouths flapped enthusiastically without always matching the words kids loved it anyway. Yogi tried to deliver presents, borrowed a sleigh that definitely did not belong to him, and got chased by a series of increasingly frustrated park rangers. Boo Boo, ever patient, offered gentle advice that Yogi ignored every single time. Families watched it once or twice before it vanished. Because it was a regional broadcast, no major studio stored the master reel, and reruns depended on whichever local station happened to have a usable copy. By the 1990s, most of those copies were gone. People still argue about the exact plot, but everyone agrees on one thing. Yogi dressed in winter gear stumbling through the snow is a memory too delightful to lose completely. Christmas with the Groovy Ghoulies was unlike any holiday cartoon before or since. Imagine a group of cheerful monsters celebrating Christmas as if they were hosting a rock concert inside a haunted house decorated with twinkling lights and plastic snow. The Ghoulies sang, danced, cracked jokes, and somehow made the spooky season work perfectly with the festive one. Kids adored the bright colors and silly humor, while adults enjoyed the surprisingly catchy songs. It was chaotic, lively, and exactly what 70s animation did best: embrace the weird and make it fun. But the special relied heavily on music owned by multiple companies, and when those rights expired, the whole production was yanked from circulation. Attempts to reissue it ran into legal snarls that turned the special into television folklore. Today, it survives mostly as a nostalgic whisper among fans who remember the joy of watching monsters celebrate Christmas like the world's friendliest house band. Mr. Belvedere took the classic idea of the proper British butler and dropped him right into an all-American household, and the result was pure comedic charm. Christopher Hewitt played Lynn Belvedere, a refined, sharp-tongued butler who took a job managing the chaotic Owens family in suburban Pennsylvania. Between the sloppy kids, the grumpy father, and the constant cultural misunderstandings, Belvedere always managed to stay one step ahead, armed with cutting wit and impeccable manners. What made the show work wasn't just the humor, it was the respect underneath the sarcasm. Belvedere genuinely cared for the family, guiding them through everyday problems with wisdom disguised as dry one-liners. His diary entries at the end of each episode offered clever reflections that wrapped everything together with a touch of British class. Mr. Belvedere struck the perfect balance between sophistication and slapstick, turning cultural differences into lessons about empathy and understanding. It made audiences laugh, but it also reminded them that wisdom can come from the unlikeliest places, even a manservant with an endless supply of patience and polished comebacks. The Partridge Family Christmas cartoon episode was the kind of 70s holiday special that felt like someone took the spirit of the show, added twice as many sparkles, and then animated the whole thing with the brightest crayons in the studio. The Partridge Kids, complete with perfectly feathered hair, even in cartoon form, piled into their Technicolor tour bus for a holiday adventure that made very little sense and yet somehow felt exactly right. Every scene swayed to upbeat music that sounded like Christmas carols, sped up just enough to keep the energy high. Laurie tried to keep everyone organized. Danny took charge of situations he definitely should not have been in charge of, and little Tracy occasionally wandered off to talk to friendly animals that appeared without explanation. It was cheerful, chaotic, and genuinely fun, but the animated spin-off never had a stable home in syndication, and the Christmas episode suffered most. Licensing bounced between companies, reruns were limited, and eventually the holiday special vanished entirely. Fans remember it the way people remember dreams: colorful, warm, and slightly confusing, but full of 70s charm. Few shows in television history balanced humor and humanity quite like Different Strokes. The story followed Arnold and Willis Jackson, two brothers from Harlem adopted by a wealthy widower, Mr. Drummond. Their move into a Park Avenue penthouse created endless culture clashes and comic misunderstandings. Gary Coleman as Arnold became a phenomenon. His expressive face, quick wit, and the now legendary catchphrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" turned him into one of the decade's most beloved stars. But underneath the laughs, the show addressed deeper themes: race, class, and belonging, with surprising grace. It was funny, yes, but also warm and grounded in compassion. Audiences connected to the genuine affection between the characters, which made every heartfelt moment land even harder. Different Strokes became more than a sitcom. It was a message about family, understanding, and finding common ground in a divided world. Long after it ended, Arnold's grin and that unforgettable catchphrase still echo through pop culture as reminders of the laughter that brought people together. In the 1970s, educational dinosaur cartoons were all the rage, so naturally someone decided dinosaurs should help Santa save Christmas. The Christmas Dinosaurs Save Santa was a bright, prehistoric adventure filled with cheerful brontosauruses, chatty pterodactyls, and a T-Rex with a surprisingly gentle heart. The dinosaurs teamed up to clear snowy paths, carry giant toy sacks, and guide Santa's sleigh when his reindeer caught a seasonal cold. Kids loved seeing their favorite ancient creatures wrapped in scarves and singing holiday songs. The animation had that charming, slightly clunky look where every movement felt like a proud effort. But as interest in educational dinosaur cartoons faded near the end of the decade, the special lost its audience and its funding network stopped airing it. Studios shuffled content, and soon the Christmas dinosaurs marched quietly into extinction once again. Today, it is remembered mostly through nostalgic descriptions and the faint memory of a T-Rex wearing earmuffs. There was a brief moment in the 1970s when someone decided the live-action holiday film, The Christmas That Almost Was Not Deserved, an animated remake, and so it was born. The animated edition had a quirky, bouncy energy, as if everyone involved was trying to squeeze every last drop of whimsy out of the original story. The characters were redesigned with rounder faces, bigger eyes, and more dramatic gestures that occasionally drifted into unintentional comedy. The villain looked slightly less menacing and slightly more confused, and Santa Claus had a habit of nodding his head in a looping animation that made him appear unusually agreeable. The songs, reimagined for animation, were catchy in that delightful but slightly off-key way only 70s soundtracks could achieve. Although the special aired a few times during holiday marathons, it never found the same loyal audience as its live-action predecessor over time. The master tapes were shuffled from one storage space to another, caught in a cycle of network changes and distribution reshuffling. Eventually, the animated remake slipped out of circulation entirely. People who watched it as children describe it with the kind of fond uncertainty usually reserved for dreams, vivid in feeling, fuzzy in detail, and oddly comforting. Yet, finding proof of its existence is almost impossible now. It is one of those specials that lived briefly, brightly, and then drifted quietly into television folklore. If any of these forgotten 80s Christmas movies stirred a memory or made you laugh, share your favorites in the comments below. Tap like to keep the nostalgia alive and subscribe so you never miss another trip back into the holiday chaos we grew up loving.